Welcome to Somnolent Conspiracies. Tonight without ghosts. Only the kind of honesty that ash, glass, and habit can't help but tell. There's a bar in the warehouse district that keeps its lights low and its secrets lower. The regulars say it smells like citrus cleaner and old rye. The owner says the cameras are for insurance. The band says the mix is always too bright. On a rain-polished night just after closing, a man died on the floor between the jukebox and the back booth. No one saw the blow land, and nobody meant to remember the order of drinks. But on the bar, in the ring left by a sweating highball, lay a single butane lighter, cheap chrome, blue body, the kind you buy 2 for 1 at the register. Every other smoker swore they brought matches. The lighter does not care about stories. Cares about how a thumb approaches a wheel. Our narrator is Nadia Hart, a city detective who prefers financial crimes but speaks fluent bar. She pays attention to what people do with their hands when they think their faces are the story. The victim is Rory Dell, a bookmaker with a smile like a loan. The suspects fit easily into a booth. Marta Quinlan, bartender. Eli Shore, guitarist. Dax Mercer, the owner. Poppy Lynn, a copywriter with a talent for darts. And Jonah Reyes, Rory's silent partner in most things. Someone lost their temper, their position, or their nerve. The lighter will decide which. We will stay on the ground. Rim prints, spurts, spill arcs, will wear soot on cuffs, and the way a left hand crowds the space around a glass. The ending will not be a trick. It will be the sum of small truths arranged in order until the answer has nowhere else to sit. Take a breath. The room is quiet enough to hear a spark. Part 1, closing time, 1 body. I got the call a little after 1 in the morning, the sort of hour when a city forgets its manners. The rain had burnished the warehouse district to a shine, puddles laid out like loose coins. The bar sat mid-block with the sign half-lit, a name I had seen but could not remember when sober. I pushed past the blue strobes and the thin strip of yellow tape that never convinces anyone of anything. Inside, it smelled like citrus cleaner trying to outvote old rye and failing by a narrow margin. Rory Dell lay on the floor between the jukebox and a back booth. Supine, eyes open. The back of his head had met something hard. The blood halo had stopped deciding to be a circle and congealed into an uneven stain. A single rocks glass had given up and broken near his right shoulder. The base intact, the bowl in 3 teeth-shaped curves that fit together like a small puzzle no one wanted solved. The patrol officer on scene was new enough to obey the tape lines she had set. She nodded when I showed my badge. Her report was simple. Noise complaint from a neighbor, a bartender's voice shouting, then silence, then the scrape of a chair. She arrived at 1:12 and found 5 people in the room and 1 body on the floor. She had locked the front door, asked everyone to sit, and kept them there. I thanked her for the neatness and moved in. Bars speak in lines and smears. I started with the dull things. The cash drawer behind the bar was shut and balanced to my eye. The back door was unlatched but held by a chain looped through a bracket halfway up, a habit from when the neighborhood still believed in a breeze. On the floor, I saw thin, wet tracks from that back door toward the bar edge, rainwater carried in small crescents by sols that had not been wiped well. The stage by the window held a cheap amp and a stand with a cable still wound around its foot. Someone had hurried and then pretended they had not. At the near corner of the bar, a coaster had a glass ring dark with condensation. Beside it sat a butane lighter, the cheap chrome kind with a blue body that gas stations put in a bowl by the register. A lime wedge, damp and tired, leaned against the coaster like it had lost the will to garnish. Every matchbook behind the bar was still wrapped in its paper belly band, stacked in a row under the rail as if counting themselves. My thumb itched not to touch the lighter. I left it for the unit photographer and kept looking. I like people better when they think I am watching only the floor. It gives me time to see what their hands are doing. I started with the bartender, Marta Quinlan, early 30s, towel still over 1 shoulder, knuckles pink from a recent scrub. She had the set jaw of someone who has rehearsed 3 different versions of the truth and is deciding which one will live. Next to her was the owner, Dax Mercer, all square head and gym shoulders in a shirt that said Saturdays are for friends in a way that made me suspect he charged his friends full price. On a bar stool sat a man with a guitar case leaning against his knee, Eli Shore, hair tied back, apology already loaded into his eyes. At the far end, a woman was perched on the edge of a booth, legs crossed, dark chalk faint on 2 fingers of her left hand. She introduced herself as Poppy Lynn and kept her face neutral like a copywriter who knows every word is a trap. Near the jukebox, but standing away from the body as if distance could season him with innocence, was Jonah Reyes. He was compact, strong in the forearms, the kind of strength a man gets from moving money counters or boxes of bottles. I knew him by reputation before he said his name. He had been Rory's silent partner in several things that never required paper. Crouched by Rory. The occipital impact was plain, a clean line of force meeting bone. The ring of blood was tight, not a splash field, which told me the strike had been from close in and not a long arc swing. His hands were open. The right knuckles showed a low scrape like he had tried to reach across himself to block something coming from his left and had met wood or lacquer. The coat was a shade too expensive for the room. The wallet in the inside pocket told me he had enjoyed collecting cards that opened doors and tabs. The phone had a spider crack in the corner, cosmetic, not new. I stood and told everyone we were locked in for a while. I took phones one by one, labeled them with a strip of tape and my initials, and set them by the register. Truth likes quiet rooms. Marta spoke first. People in aprons always do. She said they were closing. Last call had been clean. Rory had stayed behind with Jonah to talk business at the bar. Eli was wrapping cables. Poppy was finishing a last game of darts against herself. Dax had been tallying receipts and thinking about beer suppliers who did not return messages. She said there was no fight, just the same kind of heat that comes when favors have run out. She had gone under the bar to empty the glass washer when she heard a heavy bump and Eli say something like, "Hey." Eli confirmed the hey. He had seen Rory fall in the corner of his eye. He had not seen a weapon. He had not seen a wind-up. He had seen Dax swear at the security monitor when it flicked to black for a minute and then came back. He tried to laugh as if the dead always make funny timing. It died in his throat before he finished. Poppy said very little. She watched me watch her left hand. The chalk was recent, a pale dust in the crease at the base of her thumb. She said she had been looking at the board and lining up a double when the sound came and the room pulled in all its breath. She had not dropped the dart. It was there on the rail, waiting. Dax talked about the camera system, which he swore was for insurance only. He said the rain sometimes made the recorder hum and quit. He said he loved the city, but it was hard to love him back. He tried to step into the center of the scene by telling me about the balance of the drawer and his habit of keeping wooden matches at the end of the bar because paper torn from matchbooks looked cheap. The wooden matches did not show themselves. The paper ones sat untouched under the rail like a row of shy teeth. Jonah kept his tone flat. He said it had been an argument. He said there had been cash between them and a plan that had started to leak through the seams. He had raised his hands, he said, to show he was done arguing. Rory had said a word Jonah would not repeat. Jonah had looked away at the sound of the recorder popping, and when he looked back, Rory was on the floor. It was a story that had found every safe harbor and docked there. I walked the rectangle from the back door to the bar again. The wet footprints came in a pair from the back, a right then a left, like a quick step on an anxious errand. They faded near where the coaster sat. The lime wedge had dried enough on its cut face to leave a faint crescent on the wood. Pith side facing toward the bar stool where Rory had been, which said someone had placed it with their left hand without thinking or wiping their fingers. The coaster itself had a small scorch on the outer edge, a mark the size of a fingernail, light brown rather than black. Could have been a careless ember. Could have been someone lighting without looking. I kept my hands from the lighter, but anyone could see the factory sticker peeling at one corner of its blue shell. Bars that order from vendors do not get lighters when they like selling matchbooks. This one had come in someone's pocket. I looked over the length of chrome and saw a thin crescent of polish loss on the left side near the jet. Not proof. Not yet. But it let me know what to watch later. The patrol officer coughed and nodded at the small bank of screens near the end of the bar. The DVR had a line of time at the bottom. It showed a stretch from 102 to 111. At 107, the picture cut to black for a minute like an eyelid had come down. When the picture returned at 1:08, Rory was on the floor and every face in the room had taken a position it thought would look natural in the first telling. I asked Marta to show me the breaker and the power strip that fed the recorder. She led me behind the back counter to a small gray panel half hidden by a rack that held clean glassware. Dust lay on the edge of the door where the heel of a hand had swiped. The smear slanted slightly down from left to right. A left-handed motion would do that in passing. A right hand would leave a different arc. The mark meant nothing to anyone but me for the moment. It went into the box of things that would matter later. I moved us back into the open. I told them we would keep it simple at first. I wanted to establish who smoked and how. It is the kind of question people answer without a story ready. Marta said the Zippo that used to live behind the till had walked a few weeks back. She kept paper matches taped under the rail out of habit. Dax liked wooden matches because they burned longer and looked like he had thought about the small things. Eli lifted a small device from his pocket and said he vaped and did not need fire. Poppy fished a little waterproof tube from her bag and showed storm matches that would light in a gale. She smiled and said she liked certainty. Jonah said he did not smoke. His tone had the tidy pride of a man who thinks one abstention is an alibi. I watched their wrists while they spoke. The simple motions are the ones that betray a person. Marta poured water into a glass for me and held the heavy bottle in her right, steadying with her left, a bartender's learned economy. When she wiped the bar, she moved left to right, drawing the towel toward the ice well like a broom on its homeward pass. Dax stacked 2 pint glasses with his right hand, tapping the rim with his left to settle them. A pale line on his left wrist showed where a watch usually lived, which fits a right-hand dominant owner. Eli looped his cable with muscle memory and slung his case to his left shoulder so his right arm would be free. Poppy ran her left thumb over the chalk line on her forefinger, a reflex of someone who throws with the left and dusts the fingers without thinking. Jonah signed my property receipt for the phones with his left hand. He said he was ambidextrous. People who are do not mention it unless invited. People who are not fall back on the word when they know a hand is about to tell on them. I let the room settle into quiet. The rain on the front glass softened. The neon letter that was still working hummed like a fly near a window. I looked at the lighter and then at the coaster and then at the faces that were pretending not to look where I looked. There was no obvious weapon in the room. The blood halo told me we were looking for something close in, something bar simple, something that would fit in a sink and look innocent. It would not hide for long. I told them what would happen next. The door would stay locked. Their phones would stay shut. I would ask for their hands and their patience. We would let the room give up the order of things. And because I trusted hands more than mouths, I started where the flame lives. Part 2: Hands that know fire. The lighter sat where a stranger would have left it, close enough to reach, not so close that ownership could be claimed without risk. I asked Marta to fetch the vendor ledger she kept in the office. She returned with a folded sheet and a tired pen. The bar's convenience supplier did paper goods, napkins, stir sticks, and matchbooks with the logo stamped in white. No lighters. The last 2 months of invoices repeated that fact in columns. The cheap blue chrome did not match anything this place bought on purpose. I asked Marta where she kept her own fire. She lifted the rail and showed the tape beneath, a neat line of matchbooks fixed under the lip where a bartender could tear one free with a thumb and not lose pace. She tore one away now without looking at her hands, the motion a practiced flick and pull. The book was tight and white. The striker strip was unmarked. I counted the sealed books in their row and compared them with the invoice. They matched. No one had opened the bar's paper fire that night. I let the forensic photographer finish with the lighter and then stood near it without touching. The glass ring under it was left of center on the coaster. That is not where a right hand rests a tool it will use again. Most right-hand smokers park the lighter directly in front of their glass or just to the right of it, so that the same hand can trap the lighter and the glass in the same efficient reach. Left-hand smokers put it slightly left of the glass, so the thumb finds the wheel without a reach across the drink. The placement was a small nudge in one direction. Small nudges build bridges. I walked them through the request. Each person would show me how they lit what they lit when they were not being watched. I would provide clean gloves for anyone who worried about trace. No one declined. The patrol officer stood by with the property bags and a careful face. Marta took the matchbook she had torn free and struck with her right, cupping the flame with her left while her mouth softened around the curve that the match asked for. Her hands did not hesitate. She did not over-accommodate in a way that would read as performance. When I asked her to use the seized lighter as if she were in a rush, she lifted it with her right hand and rolled the wheel with her right thumb, the flame leaning inward toward her palm. She placed it back where she had taken it, a neat right of center, exactly where a right hand would prefer to find it next time. Dax performed the ritual he had praised. He reached into a drawer and produced wooden matches in a small cork jar. He tapped one free with the side of his right index finger, struck it on a spare strip he kept taped inside the drawer, and let it burn a moment before bringing it up. He could do it without thinking. When I asked him to use the lighter, he smiled as if indulging me, and rolled with his right thumb. The flame bent inward. When he set it down, he placed it an inch to the right of his glass, as if by instinct, and then moved it back to center for neatness that he thought I was measuring. Eli held up his small device again and said he did not need flame. I nodded and still had him try the lighter. He used his right hand and rolled with his right thumb. The flame wobbled as he found the pressure point. He put it down on the right. His hands belong to a man who knows strings and picks and has not rolled a wheel often. Poppy's turn carried more weight. She chose a storm match from her tube and struck it on the cap with her left. The flame flared and held, a stubborn little lamp that wanted to keep its life against wind. She brought it up with her left and pinched it out with her right, an economy that looked like a chore done 100 times. When I handed her the lighter, she reached for it with her right. She rolled with her right thumb. The flame leaned inward. She watched the angle of it, and her eyes moved to the light brown scorch on the coaster, then back to me. She placed the lighter to the right of the glass and folded her hands as if to keep them from saying anything else. Jonah waited until last. He said again that he did not smoke. I asked him to humor me. He picked up the lighter with his left. His hand corrected itself for balance in the first beat, the way a hand that owns an object does. He rolled the wheel with his left thumb. The flame snapped up and bent outward, away from his palm, bright and steady. It looked like a demonstration his thumb had given many times. He placed the lighter down without looking at the coaster. He placed it left of center. No one spoke. The room understood the smallness of the evidence and the size of the hole it cut in a certain kind of denial. I did not fill the silence. I let it carry the weight for a few seconds. Then I asked each person about fire and what they used it for inside the hour that mattered. Marta said she had lit nothing since last call. She had set up a lemon for a club soda just after 12:30 and made a bitter face when the knife slipped on the peel. The lime wedge on the bar was not for her. Her hands showed a shallow cut on the right index finger, already closed. The line on the lime's pith had a nick on the left side of the white, the kind a left hand makes when it forgets the delicate angle and bites a little too hard. Dax said he had lit a candle at the end of the bar after the live set to make the room look like it was still welcoming. He admitted he had blown it out 10 minutes before closing and put the match in a dish of water so the smell would not linger. The dish was where he said it would be, with a single soggy match in it. The lighter had nothing to do with his ritual. Eli said he had vaped by the window and then tucked the device in his jacket when he saw the patrol car lights roll by outside on some other call around 12:40. He had not reached for a lighter all night. His hands fidgeted. His eyes went to the amp, then back to the floor. He was telling the truth and also thinking about something he wished he had not seen, which is often what truth looks like. Poppy said she had lit one cigarette outside when she left the darts league around 11 last week and none tonight, because the rain had killed the urge and because the bar did not like the smell. She smiled at the lie she had told the bar on its behalf and let the smile go. Her storm matches were dry. Her fingers were chalked on the left. She had not used a lighter in an hour. Jonah repeated that he did not smoke. He repeated it with the same tidy pride. I lifted the ashtray on the bar by where he had been and showed him the half-smoked cigarette with the lip indent on the left and the ash fall on the left side of the tray. He said it belonged to someone else. He did not name who. He did not need to. There were not enough mouths in the room to share the blame. I stepped back to the coaster. The scorch mark on its outer edge sat where a flame angled outward would kiss it if a left thumb rolled the wheel while the hand rested near the glass. The napkin that had been under the coaster showed a faint hairline of singe on its right edge. That matched our demonstration too. The chrome on the lighter had a shallow crescent of polish loss on the left face near the jet, exactly where a left thumb rides and rubs. I asked the evidence technician to bag the lighter and pull a partial from the valve rim. The plastic lifter came back with a clean loop pattern that would mean little now but would mean a great deal later. I asked for a swab of soot on the left cuff of Jonah's shirt. The fabric showed a fine dark smudge that did not belong to rain or dust. The back counter near the breaker carried a left hand swipe through dust. The heel of a hand drawn down as if a body moving past had steadied itself while a finger reached for a small switch. The AUX rocker on the recorder strip sat leftmost in a row of even teeth. The tip of it held a clean fingerprint under the dust. I did not say whose I expected it to be. All of that lived in my pockets as notes and in the sealed bags as promise. Before anyone left this room, I wanted one more foundation stone that would hold the weight of the rest. The lighter was foreign to the bar. It had been placed left of center. It's where said a left thumb owned it. The bar's supplier did not sell lighters. The matchbooks were still wrapped. I looked at Jonah. His left hand had settled on the rail as if to keep the room from moving. I told him we would be checking the cameras for the missing minute. I told him the sound on the stage microphone had stayed alive. I told him the room was going to tell us the order whether we wanted it to or not. He nodded. He did not ask which part of the order I thought belonged to him. Part 3, the wheel and the thumb. I have learned not to ask the city for a lab when the room itself can play that role. The kit case I carry is ugly and honest. I set it on the corner of the bar and open the latches. The small stereo microscope folds out like a toy built by a careful child. I asked the evidence technician for the lighter. He passed the bag to me with the politeness people save for things that can burn them twice. I worked with gloves. The mask of habit helps more than the latex. I eased the lighter out and set it in the cradle beneath the scope. The room leaned in without moving. When you make a scene smaller, people try to fill it with their eyes. Under low power, the flint will flash like a tiny saw. It was not symmetrical. The lower left quadrant showed the metal dulled and bud. A matte strip where a thumb had come down again and dragged past the ideal bite. The burrs leaned in a counterclockwise bias. A right thumb tends to roll the wheel clockwise and leaves its burrs leaning the other way. A left thumb rolls the wheel counter to the clock and teaches the metal to accept that pressure. Years of touching city lighters have taught me that the hand writes its name in those little leaning teeth. I turned the wheel a quarter and checked the edges. The right side of the wheel had kept its sharpness like a faucet you do not use. The left had blunted just enough to take the shine. I noted it and moved to the case. Chrome is vain. It shows every compromise. Near the jet port on the left face, the plating had lost a narrow crescent of polish. It was not scratched in a single event. It was the soft erosion of skin and pressure, the rub of a thumb that cups the case and leans toward fire. The right face still held its mirror. On the left side of the case, a smudge had fixed itself into a shadow the size and shape of a thumb pad. You do not get that mark from a single roll. You get it by making the lighter a small habit that lives on the left side of your body, where your hand knows to find it without the eyes. The soot was not thick. The bar's air would have scrubbed heavy carbon away by now, but the ghost of it had settled into the fine scratches of the plating and stayed. It was enough. I shifted the scope to the bottom edge where the valve sits. There, on the rim of the refill port, the powder had lifted a partial earlier. With the lens, I could see the oil mark that remained. The ridge flow curved into a loop that was tight and neat. I did not need it to be a match in this room. I only needed it to prove that a thumb had made its home in the same place I would expect it to if the owner leaned left. I bagged the lighter again and laid it on the coaster where it had started its public life. The scorch at the coaster's outer edge looked less like an accident now and more like the first note of a tune I had heard before. I asked the technician for a fresh napkin and set it where the last one had been. Then I asked for a second lighter of similar make from the kit. It was clean, a training tool we use when we want a behavior without a contamination fight. I let them watch me think. Then I lit the clean lighter with my right thumb and held it as a right-hand smoker would. The flame leaned inward toward the body of the case. I touched the edge of the napkin and it refused the heat unless I forced it. I set that lighter down to the right of the glass and said nothing. Then I switched hands and did what a left hand does. I rolled with my left thumb. The flame grew and leaned outward, away from the case. I let it kiss the napkin at the same distance. It browned the paper in a neat little crescent, a sister to the mark already on the coaster. It did the same to the wood when I held it near. People think fire is wild. It is not. It is obedient to hands. No one spoke because there was nothing to barter yet. It was still only the language of habit and angle, which does not accuse on its own. It only points. Eli found his voice first. He asked if burrs could come from a wheel being stiff. He said a person might press harder if it stuck. I lowered the magnification and turned the wheel back and forth with a probe. The movement was smooth. The spring tension was what you would expect from a lighter that had been flicked more than its price deserved and had not yet given up. A stiff wheel burrows a different pattern. It fights in spikes. This wheel had been guided by one thumb in one direction for a very long set of small moments. Poppy was watching the soot mark on the case. I could feel her thinking through her own rituals, measuring where her left hand had told on her in other rooms. She asked if someone could have used the lighter with their offhand in a pinch. I told her yes. People borrow hands when they need to, but a borrowed hand leaves a mess. It sets the tool down in the wrong place. It fumbles the angle. It forgets where the flame goes. It does not leave a thumbpad's worth of history on the left side of a case. Dax cleared his throat and asked if any of this meant the owner had struck anyone with the lighter. I said no. The lighter could not have made that wound. But it had been present at the exact height and distance where a left hand would reach when an argument thinned the air. I said the lighter helped me listen to the room. He said he preferred a room that explained itself without help. The dead make poor explainers. I took a fresh set of photographs through the scope. The wheel from 4 angles. The left face with the crescent of dull chrome. The smudge. The case edge. The placement on the coaster in relation to the ring left by the last glass. I wrote my notes with the same neatness I require of myself when I am tired. Tidy notes do not keep you honest, but they make your honesty easier to understand in the morning. When I had finished with the lighter, I put the scope away and cleaned the space with a new towel. Marta's eyes tracked the motion. When she wipes, she always goes left to right, pulling toward the ice well. The towel in my hand went the other way. It is a small thing to watch a person flinch at the wrong direction. I told the group what I had. The lighter was not from the bar. Its placement left of center fit a left-hand smoker. The flint will wore its burrs in a counterclockwise lean. The chrome lost polish on the left face. The soot sat where a left thumb rests. The scorch on the coaster fit a flame leaning away from a left hand. None of it named a killer. All of it named a hand. Jonas smiled at the floor. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the kind a man makes when he has spotted the end of a path he did not wish to take and realizes he walked it all the same. He said again that he did not smoke. He said it like a man trying to move a piano by himself. He lifted his left hand from the rail and folded both hands together in a careful knot that did not look natural on him. I asked the technician for his cuff again. The left sleeve still held the faint dark of soot near the edge where a cuff brushes the body of a lighter as a hand rolls the wheel. Butane soot is soft. It settles on fabric and smears when you try to pretend it is water or dust. The right cuff was clean. The left was not. I took the swab and bagged it. Eli shifted the guitar case and found a way to watch without being watched. He had seen the same thing I had seen when Jonah lit the demonstration in the last part. The small correction of balance. The way his hand placed the lighter back down without thinking about where it belonged. The hand that owns an object does not need to look to return it. Marta asked if I wanted to take the lemon knife from the station. The metal had a notch in the blade where it had bitten a rind with too much force. I said I would. The lime wedge on the bar had dried in a posture that still told on the hand that had turned it. The knife nick on the left side of the pith matched a left-hand slice that does not come from a bartender who works right and lives on the speed of repeating the same cut with the same hand. I stood in Rory's last angle. The broken glass's base showed a sheer line that would later matter more. For now, I fixed the lighter in my mind as a small axis that the night had spun around. The city sometimes gives you a compass no bigger than a thumb. The rain let up and left a clean sound on the window. The neon letter hummed along. I looked at their wrists again, the watches and the tans and the chalk. The simple motions were already speaking. I would follow them next. Hands tell better stories than mouths. And when the mouth insists, it never learned the habit that the hand confesses. I know which witness to seat closer to the jury. Part for the poor, the wipe, the tell. People think they can command their faces. It is their hands that do the mutiny. I like to give hands chores and see what they say when the mouth is busy sounding respectable. I started with water. I asked Marta for a glass and did not specify from where. She moved at once, all bar grace and muscle memory. She lifted the rail with her left, stepped through, and went for the shelf bottle she kept for staff between rushes. She gripped the neck in her right, pinched the bottom with the left, and poured in a clean right-hand arc that kept the stream out of its own splash. When she wiped the inevitable bead from the rim, she wiped left to right and dragged the towel toward the ice well. A return stroke she had made since the first night she learned that keeping a bar clean is a matter of rhythm. Her right hand did the work. The left steadied and tidied. When she set the glass in front of me, her right thumb settled on the far edge, a simple balance point, and came back clean. I asked her to stack 3 rocks glasses as if she were closing in a hurry. She did it without thinking. Right hand lifted and nested. Left gave a guiding tap and then moved away. Every motion favored the right. Her watch lived on her left wrist. The skin under it was pale. Right-handed. No surprise. No strain. "Show me how you tape matchbooks," I said. Marta ducked, tore a strip of tape with her teeth, and ran the sticky line under the rail from left to right so her right hand could tear away a book blind during a rush. The row already there matched that direction. It was a system built for a right hand's work. The lighter left of center had never belonged in her orbit. Dax got chores next. "Balance your drawer like you would before bed," I said. He could not help performing. He squared bills with his right hand, patting stacks true with the heel of his right palm, left hand only used to hold the tray steady. Coins he scooped with the right and poured through the web of his fingers into neat nests that chimed like a minor key. When a receipt blew a little in the small draft from the cooler, he pinned it with his right index finger and thumb, and his left hovered like a supervisor. The tan line on his left wrist, where a watch had lived all summer, said the same thing. Right dominant, left idle support. "Lock and unlock your back door," I said. He looked at me, surprised that such a petty act could be part of a murder case, then did it anyway. He lifted the chain with his left to make space and turned the bolt with his right without a hiccup. When the chain slipped, his right hand caught it. The left had only ever been there to hold a door open for the real work. Eli was trying to shrink his shoulders so the guitar case would not announce him. I pointed to the stand by the window. "Pack it down and wrap your cable like you would at the end of a set." He complied. Left shoulder took the case strap so the right arm was free. Right hand wound the cable in broad, even circles, collapsing loops in quarter turns that would never kink. When he reached the end, his right fingers tucked the plug back through the last loop and cinched it. The case buckles he closed with the right without looking. He moved like a man whose right hand is his idea of himself. His left was the hand that carried what the right had finished. "Sign your name and print your number," I said, sliding a pad of blank paper his way. He took the pen in the right. The signature belonged to a right hand, the downstroke strong, the leftward returns a little airy, the hook on the final E neat and prideful. He printed his number with the right, too. The left held the page flat. The fingers never crossed each other. They kept to their side of the desk. Poppy had been quiet. She watched me as if she was watching a puzzle clock count down. I slid a piece of chalk along the rail to her. "Mark your score on the board like you did earlier," I said. She reached with her left. No hesitation. She wrote at a slight inward slant, the way left hands do when they are forced by convention to move across text built for its mirror. The chalk dust clung to the pivot of her left thumb. Just below the knuckle, a little ghost ring. She absently brushed it with the edge of her right, which only made it brighten. When she put the chalk back, she parked it to the left of the slot as if her fingers expected it to live there. Her eyes flicked to mine and back to the board. There was intelligence in that movement and a grim patience I have learned to trust. She knew what the exercise had already told me. She threw darts left-handed. She wrote scores left-handed. She would light a match left-handed. She might light a lighter with her right out of caution before me. But her body belonged to the left. "Take your stance," I said. "No throw." She stepped to the oak without argument, shoulder square, left foot slightly forward, right foot turned out for balance. Left arm came up and bent, wrist soft, fingers relaxed on an invisible barrel. The posture was muscle memory. It would not have convinced anyone who had watched League Night for more than a minute that she was anything but a lefty. Jonah waited without complaint. He tensed in the forearms the way men do when their body is used to effort and their mind has not yet decided what effort to expend next. I gave him a vendor receipt from the stack Marta had already pulled when I asked for ledgers. "Print your name and sign the bottom," I said. He took the pen in his left. He did not make a show of it. The signature was his and clean. The loops ran thick where a left hand pulls down and light where it must push. The J had a leftward start that is hard for a right hand to mimic without rehearsal. On the office computer later we would find a vendor receipt from 2 weeks prior with the same left-hand signature. Tonight I only needed my eyes. Ambidextrous is a word people borrow when the hand they want to deny is the hand they use to count cash. I offered him a ring of keys from the office hook. "Find the restroom key," I said. He took them with his left. He found the right key without looking and turned it in his left hand to sit against his index finger, the small ceremony we all do with keys we use every day. He could have faked any of these small acts. He did not. People rarely think they are transparent when they are busy with tools. The tools call the hand they know. I kept my own voice even. "Show me how you would hold a muddler and bang ice when the rush is on." Marta made a noise of protest. "He does not muddle," she said. Jonah shrugged and lifted the stainless rod from the sink where it had been left. He took it in his left hand and made a short, compact motion over the ice well, a series of crisp taps that would break a stubborn block without splashing. It was a neat, economical movement. The rubber tip met the steel of the well and came away wet. He set the muddler back as if it did not matter. The rubber lip showed a seam of dark he did not see. We would find the minute trace under that lip later in the lab, but the tell was already there in the way he favored the left in a chore he claimed not to do. I asked the patrol officer to bring the small step stool from the office. I set it by the breaker. Dust lived on the panel door like a soft map. Near the top edge, a left hand had pulled a clean diagonal in the last hour, the heel of the palm planting and dragging down as the fingers went for the switch. I stood on the stool and reached for the AUX rocker the recorder used. Without thinking, my right hand lifted toward it and my left mirrored. I caught my own habit and stopped. I asked each of them to mime the motion of reaching for the panel as if to steady themselves while they flipped the switch quickly. The right-handers reached with their right. The left-handers planted with the left and reached with the left. Jonah did not mime. He watched as if the steel could accuse him. The smear had already done that. "Positions," I said, and moved them in the room like chessmen. "Where were you in the minute before Rory fell?" Marta stood behind the bar near the glass washer, right shoulder to the sink. Dax planted at the far register where he could see the room. Eli stood by the amp, cable in hand, the angle of his body still canted toward the stage. Poppy faced the board, left shoulder forward, right foot back. Jonah took the place at Rory's left, close enough that his left elbow would crowd where the lighter had been. The picture fit the first story each of them had told without any of them having to lie about it now. I walked the route from Jonah's place to the small patch of floor where the DVR wiring snakes up behind the bar. The path brushed the back counter and the gray panel with its left-hand smear. I walked from there to the sink where the muddler had waited for years to be an innocent tool and had, for one short second, been something else. "Two of you are left-handed," I said. "Both of you were near the bar. One of you had a reason to be near the breaker. One of you had a reason to keep your sleeve clean. One of you did not. Poppy's eyes sharpened, not in fear but in calculation, the way a player measures a board for the next hard throw. She looked at her own sleeve and at the clean cuff. She looked at Jonah's left cuff and the small darkness we had already seen. Her jaw worked once and went still. Jonah looked at the floor. I am not choosing yet, I said. I am listening. The room is giving me a direction. The lighter pointed left. Your hands confirmed it. Now we will see where the glass points. I let the silence stand. Bars do not stay quiet for long. But when they do, they tell you the truth they cannot afford to speak out loud. Part 5, The Glass That Turned. I asked for a clear field around Rory and the shard constellation that was once his drink. The technician lifted pieces into paper evidence bags, but I kept the base in place for a moment longer. It is the one part of a broken glass that stays honest. It remembers where the weight sat and how it left. The rock's glass here had a thick base with a small ridge that made a shallow ring. One side of that ring had a bright scrape that cut diagonally from near 6 o'clock toward 2. The edges showed a clean shear, not a crush. When a hand knocks a glass sideways in anger, the first push sends the liquid ahead of the rim and the rim bites down. Here the bite ran from Rory's right toward his center, the kind of line you get when force comes from his left and the hand does not travel far before the strike changes the conversation. The spill told its own story. On the floor, dark arcs curved in a sweep that ran clockwise from the point nearest Rory's right hip. The arcs were thin, then fat, then torn, which is how a half-full glass lays itself down when it is tipped and the liquid outruns the container. If a right hand had struck from Rory's right, the arcs would have started near his left side and run the other way. The floor had become a record. All I had to do was play it with my eyes. I crouched by the coaster. It had printed the bar's logo a fraction off true, as if the press had shifted during the run. On this one, the logo faced a little left. The coaster sat under the ring where Rory's glass had been. It had been rotated about 20 degrees counterclockwise. Right-handers pick up and set down with small clockwise corrections, rotating the bottom edge of a glass inward as they settle it. Left-handers do the reverse. They turn a little left. In a hurry, they exaggerate it. The coaster had not been nudged for the sake of symmetry since. The ring had dried into that position. Whoever had set down that last drink had done it with a left hand that was paying attention to a different problem. The lime wedge near the lighter leaned with its cut face toward the stool Rory had occupied. The pith showed a shallow nick on the left side, the tiny bruise of a blade that had bitten a little when a hand sliced downward and shifted. Men and women who cut limes 8 hours a night nurse a way of doing it that keeps fingers and pith clean. Marta did. The nick here did not belong to her. It belonged to someone who cuts a lime now and then, and tonight did it with the left. I called Marta over and asked her to cut 2 limes for me. She did it without a show, right hand on the knife, left steadying, clean quarters in quick strokes that did not bruise the pith. I set one of her wedges by the coaster and compared it with the stray. The skin gloss, the angle, the nick, the way the juice pooled at the cut line. They were not sisters. The stray had been handled by a left hand that pinched wrong and slid the blade in a touch. Who preps limes when you are short? I asked. Marta, Dax said, as if answering could keep him out of the answer's path. Or me if the crowd is quiet. Or a customer who thinks they are helpful. I do not like that last kind. Jonah, I said. He shook his head. I do not cut fruit. Poppy, I said. She met my eyes. I cut a lime for myself when no one was looking. I should have asked. It was late. I wanted the taste. With your left, I said. With my left, she answered, not bothering to deny she was the one. It was before midnight, not at the end. It may have been. The wedge's dryness sat between. It had been cut long enough back to dull but close enough to still hold shape. The lime told me there had been left-handed hands moving at the rail. It did not yet say which left hand lifted the muddler. I moved to Rory's right hand. On the knuckles low and outward a shallow abrasion had raised a ridge. The kind a man gets when he reaches across his own body to knock something away and strikes wood or metal with the tops of his fingers. If a blow came from his left, he would have thrown his right hand across his chest, short and protective, and hit the underside of the bar or the bar rail. The bar rail in front of Rory had a fresh dent the size of a ring. The paint there had a sharp edge, new enough to keep its tooth. I measured from the rail edge to the floor, then from Rory's shoulder to the floor with my eyes. The geometry wanted to be neat. The defensive swipe, the rail, the fall. I marked the dent with a small flag and let it stand. "Show me how Rory held his glass," I said to Marta. "He cradled," she said, demonstrating with an empty. He hooked 3 fingers and let his thumb find the rim. He would twist the glass a little when he argued. Left hand when he wanted to make a point, right when he wanted to keep his wallet near his left pocket. He was not consistent about that the way some men are. "Tonight," I said. "Left," she said, certain now that she had allowed herself to see. He argued with Jonah with his left hand on the glass, his right near his coat. I took the broken base and showed her the scrape. "From his left," I said. She did not answer. She did not have to. I had Poppy and Jonah take their places again. Poppy stood to Rory's right, where she said she had perched between throws, one knee pressed to the booth, left shoulder open to the room. Jonah stood to Rory's left, elbows on the bar, turned half toward him. In the minutes before the recorder went blind, the camera had shown them in roughly these positions. The technician had frozen the last clean frame. The image, a silver and green wash from a cheap lens, hung on the small monitor near the register. Jonah's left elbow crowded the space where the lighter sat. The coaster in front of Rory showed the same skew I saw now. I took a clean rocks glass, set it where Rory's ring had been, and asked Poppy to lift it and set it down in a hurry with her left. She did. The glass landed with the coaster turned a little left. I asked her to do the same with her right, turned a little right. I asked Jonah to lift and set with his left, the way he would if he were making a point with the other hand. He did not protest the theater. He set the glass down and the coaster turned left and bumped the lighter. The tiny catch of case against cardboard made a faint sound that I had filed from the stage microphone's recording, a grit scratch that lives under the syllable and the strike. I pointed to the spill arcs. "From Rory's right hip and away," I said. "That is how a knocked glass runs when the blow is from the left." To show the other, I set a second empty, tipped it from Rory's right, and let water stain the floor in a mirrored fan. The arcs were wrong for our scene. Everyone could see it. Eli found his voice first. "I saw Rory reach with his right before he went down," he said slow, as if lifting each word to make it weigh what it should have before. I did not think about why. I thought he was steadying himself. "Or trying to push a hand away," I said. He nodded and looked at his shoes. "Someone show me the muddler," I said. Marta fetched it from the sink. The stainless rod with the rubber tip looked as harmless as a kitchen utensil always does when it has finished its moment and gone back to pretending. I held it beside the rail. A short left-handed swing at Jonah's height would land the rubber tip about where Rory's injury began if the hand came in from closer than a full arm's length. The wound pattern had not been the long, clean break of a long arc bottle swing. It had been the flattened rectangle of something soft over something hard, backed by a short economy of motion. The muddler fit that shape. "Why would Jonah be left of Rory?" Dax asked, as if stepping into a rational gap could save him from the irrational that followed. "He could have been anywhere, because the cash drawer is here and the bank app on his phone is there," I said. "Because men who move money and feel watched put their left elbows on bars where their right hands can shield what matters. Because the lighter lives here, and men set their tools where their hands expect to find them. Because when the recorder went dark, someone brushed the panel with a left hand and reached for a switch on the left. The pattern is not about virtue. It is about reach." Poppy looked at Jonah, then at me. Her face did not ask for permission. It asked for facts that would not shame her attention to them. If the strike was from Rory's left and I was on his right, then the strike did not come from me, she said. "That is what the room says," I answered. "It still wants a sequence." I turned to the technician. "Pull the stage microphone track around the missing minute. Mark the scrape before the impact. Mark the syllable." He nodded. The room would have to wait for that sound to be lifted in a clearer form. But even from the small speaker, we had already heard the shape of it earlier. Scrape, syllable, strike. The pattern of frustration followed by short violence. The kind of triplet rooms remember. The last thing I did before we moved to the office and the digital recorder was to take one more look at Rory's right hand. The abrasion there had already started to dry. It would not show well in a photograph tomorrow unless it was marked now. I had the technician take a series, and then I pressed my own palm to the rail where the dent lived and reached across my chest with my right hand as if to block a left hand coming in fast. The angle made sense. The distance made sense. The bruise would carry the rest. I straightened and drew a breath that tasted like lime and cleaner. The simpler truths had begun to sit in order. The glass had put the hand on the left. The coaster had agreed. The spill had sung the same. The wedge had put left hands at the rail. The knuckles had told me Rory had tried to stop a blow coming from that side. Only the recorder had blinked at the wrong time. The cameras, the angles, and the missing minute. I said, almost to myself, we will let the black tell its story. I had them stay where they were while I went behind the bar toward the office. The gray panel waited with its left-hand smear. The AUX rocker still a small tooth in a neat row. If a man turned darkness into a tool, he had used the hand he trusted. The bar had already said which hand that was. Part 6, cameras, angles, and a missing minute. The office was a half room behind a half door, a place built to discourage lingering. A metal desk faced a wall that pretended to be an archive, and the archive pretended to have a system. The digital video recorder sat on a wire shelf like a squat black book with a temper. A cheap fan moved warm air from one corner to another without improving it. I stood where the breaker panel could see me. The leftward smear on its door looked less like dust now and more like a signature a hand had left while doing two things at once. I measured the height of that smear against the notch on the door frame and kept the number in my head. The recorder's interface was a tired line of time with boxes for each camera. The only camera that mattered for the bar was fixed high over the rail, covering the stools, the registers, and the front third of the room. The stage corner camera caught the window and the space around the amp, but it had no angle on the bar proper. I scrubbed back to 102 and let the footage run. The screen washed the room in greens and silvers, and the rain on the front glass crawled like another set of fingerprints. At 104, the bartender's move was a lullaby. Marta stacked glassware, wiped, and dried. At 105, Dax took a fan of bills from the register, squared them, and returned them to their slot. His right hand did the arithmetic in the air while his left hand did the choreography of ownership. At 106, Eli coiled his cable and taped it to itself with an old strip he pulled from the stand. It stuck more to his fingers than to the cable, the way tape always does at the end of a night. At 106 and 30, Poppy picked up a chalk and pointed at the board with it before she remembered she was alone in the game. She laughed once at herself and put the chalk back, left of the slot where it lived. At 107, the world breathed in. I rolled frame by frame. Jonah moved in a small burrow around the stool at Rory's left. He was too close for two men who liked each other. His left elbow crowded the strip of wood where the lighter sat. Rory's hand turned his glass the smallest degree. The coaster under it obeyed, rotating counterclockwise. Their mouths worked, but the camera offered me only the shape of words and the rise and fall of heat. At 107 and 36, Jonah reached with his right hand toward his jacket pocket, then stopped. His left hand flattened on the rail. His eyes moved past Rory for a heartbeat, as if he had remembered something about the room he could use. At 107 and 41, the image blinked. Black, a clean slab of it. The time code continued marching. The recorder still knew about the minute. It had simply refused to show it. "Rain hum," Dax said from behind me with an effortful casualness that sounded like a man trying to pass a stone. "It does that sometimes. Only for a minute. Comes back on its own." "What lives on the same strip as the recorder?" I asked. "Beer cooler. Register 2. Stage plug. A few lights. The office printer when it is not behaving. The switch that controls the recorder," I said. "Where would it be?" He pointed without thinking. "Leftmost on the auxiliary panel. It is fussy, so I leave it alone. I took a step back and looked at the smear again. Left palm. Dragged down. Fingers reaching. A left hand steadied and a left index finger found the leftmost switch without hunting. The distance from the floor matched Jonah's height, not Dax's. It was not proof, but it was the outline of proof. Audio, I said to the technician. Pull the stage microphone track through the blackout. He set the small speaker on the desk and scrubbed to 107 and 30. A low room hush, the hum of the neon, the whisper of the rain. At 107 and 41 a faint scrape, metallic and rough, climbed through the noise floor. To most ears it would be furniture against tile or a chair foot having an opinion. To anyone who has listened to a lighter will more than once, it was a small saw blade turning under a thumb. A left thumb rolls a wheel across the grain, and the wheel complains a little in a note that is notched and short. It is not music, but it is not random either. The spectrogram would show those ridges later. For now, the human ear was enough. A half second after the scrape, a single syllable broke on the mic. Not a word, not a sentence. The first part of a protest the mouth did not get time to finish. Then a fat, close impact, rubber on bone with steel behind it. Not the bottle chime and break you hear in films. A dull report, a man meeting the end of a short argument. Then the scrape of a shoe, and breath that was not followed by speech. The minute swallowed the rest and then gave the room back its picture at 108 and 41. When the image returned, Rory was on the floor in his place between the jukebox and the booth, his head at an angle that told the familiar story. Poppy was mid-throw, frozen by the sound. The dart held its line, then fell short, and she did not notice. Marta was bent under the bar at the glass washer, her right shoulder forward, her left hand braced on the counter edge. Eli had turned his head and let the cable hang. Jonah was not in the frame. The space to Rory's left was empty. "Where did you go?" I asked Jonah without turning around. "To the restroom," he said. "I heard the sound and it made me sick." "Which way did you turn?" I said. "Left," he said. I scrolled back 2 seconds after the picture returned and widened the angle to catch the hallway toward the restrooms. Jonah slid into that corridor in the first frames after the impact, his left shoulder striking the wall as he turned too fast. He left a faint wet print on the paint where his sleeve touched, rain or sink splash or something else that would read as water. I marked the wall with a small flag for swabbing. His left cuff would tell me if the soot had been pressed there before he steadied himself outside of the camera's eye. I ran the block again and again. Before the drop was a room of bar chores and a small private argument at the rail. After the drop was a playable tableau. Rory down, Poppy caught in the moment of aim, Marta under the bar, Eli half-turned, and nothing where a left hand should have been if it belonged to someone with a stake in staying seen. The recorder had not failed. It had been helped to choose the worst minute to rest. I asked Dax for the camera manual, and when he could not produce it I asked for the installer's number. He found a business card taped to the back of the monitor with a piece of dusty Scotch tape. The number would help later to explain to a jury how easily a soft switch could starve a recorder for 60 seconds without shouting about it. Tonight, I only needed the mechanism to be plausible. The leftward smear and the leftmost switch had already made it probable. "Give me the router log," I said to Dax. He blinked like a man who had been asked for the weather on a starless night. "If your network keeps device pings, I want the last hour. I want to see what wandered near the office door." He found the administration screen after 3 tries. The log was not thorough, but it gave me a breadcrumb. At 103, a device labeled Jonah phone had associated near the office access point. At 103 and change, it dropped and reappeared on the floor unit near the bar. It was the path of a man who went to the office to check a bank balance and then came back to an argument that had not resolved. "Play back 106 to 107 on the stage camera," I said. The angle caught the front windows, the jukebox light, and the quarter of space where Poppy's board lived. It also caught the small reflector on a key ring as it swung in a pocket. Jonah's left hip flashed at once as he shifted. People tell on themselves with jewelry in rooms like this. The glint marked him leaning in and then away, the energy in the movement wrong for someone merely waiting to be done with a conversation. I stepped out to the bar and measured the distance from Rory's stool to the breaker panel, from the panel to the ice well, and from the well back to Rory's place. It was a triangle that a left foot could run in 10 seconds if the body had a plan. Left hand out to steady and cut the recorder. Left hand down to lift the muddler. Left hand up in a short arc that would not splash. Left hand down again to drop the tool in the sink. Left shoulder into the hall without waiting to see the full consequence. There was nothing cinematic in it. It was efficient and ugly and human. Could the breaker flick off by itself? Dax asked, trying on sincerity like a jacket that did not fit. It could, I said, and watched his relief arrive a fraction too fast. But it did not. There is a palm print where the heel of a left hand planted, and a finger mark on the switch we will lift in an hour. The audio shows the lighter wheel before the syllable, not after. That is a habit. A left hand rolling before a mouth can decide not to speak. The impact is 1 beat later. The picture returns to a room shocked into stillness and one man already gone. Marta had come to the office doorway with the glass washer's hum still in her ear. "You are saying Jonah did this," she said. It was not a challenge. It was a plea for precision. "I am saying the room says the strike came from Rory's left," I said. "I am saying the lighter belongs to a left hand that used it naturally here and set it left of center. I am saying a left hand steadied on the panel and cut the recorder at the only useful minute. I am saying the muddler is the right shape and was left in the sink with a dry bloodline beneath a later rinse. I am saying a left sleeve shows soot. The sequence is not yet whole. The money will tell me why the minute needed to be missing." Eli found the words I needed someone else to say. "What were they arguing about?" he asked. "It was not a song. Cash," I said. "A transfer at 1:03. A text at 5:1. Bring the cash now or we are done." The recorder went blind 4 minutes later. People do not turn off witnesses for music. I let the monitors hold their still images for a last pass. Poppy's arm was frozen at the start of a throw she never made. Marta's shoulder was a solid workman's angle under the bar. Eli's cable sagged like a line between points he could not reconcile. Dax looked a shade too interested in the technology of failure. And Jonah lived in the absence the Black Minute had purchased. I shut the monitor off. The office went back to its small heat and its small hum. When you close the window the city uses to look at itself, it will tell you the truth with what it does next. I stepped back into the bar. I put my palm on the gray panel where the smear lived and felt the cool metal under the warm dust. "The missing minute is not missing," I said to the room. "It is present in what it made possible. Now we find the back countermarks and the burn that tie a left hand to both the cut and the strike." I asked the technician for luminol and a quiet light. The space under the bar would answer with a language that glows. The breaker door waited with its soft diagonal, ready to give up the ridges on the leftmost switch. The muddler waited for a second look under the rubber lip. All of it would feed a sequence I could read back without raising my voice. Part 7, the back counter and the burn. I asked for the room lights down to a patient dusk. The technician clicked the wand and the underbar bloomed in a shy blue that forgives nothing. Beneath the rail where the bartender's knees live, a field of small bright freckles mapped a normal night. People drip. I sweats. The world is not a museum. But just left of the ice well, a smear rose and widened, the shape of a hand that had planted, slid, and lifted. The heel was the brightest. The fingers trailed off as if they had been busy doing something else while the palm did the bracing. "Hold there," I said. I placed a transparent grid over the glow and measured from the floor to the highest point of the heel. Then I measured from the edge of the counter to the start of the drag. Numbers make better witnesses than adjectives. The mark matched the height a left hand of Jonah's reach would make if the body had leaned in quickly, braced, and reached for the breaker door with the same hand. A right-hander would have crossed himself awkwardly to do it. The arc here was clean. The gray panel's door took light like a lake. Across its top edge the diagonal smear glowed, the heel print bright, the ridge lines ghosting beneath the dust. I eased a gel pad onto the leftmost rocker and lifted it back. In the field lamp, the print we took was simple and decisive. A left index, ridge count consistent with Jonah, the loop riding the switch at the angle you get when a finger comes in from the near side and flicks down. We would run it later against the full set, but my eyes have been in courtrooms enough to know when the story will survive a projector. I moved back to the muddler. Stainless holds onto what it can in seams and corners. The rubber tip was ribbed and ringed at the lip where it pressed onto the metal shaft. I eased the lip back with a wooden stick and asked for a micro swab. A faint brown line had dried along the inner ring where water had not found it in a rinse. It was thin as a breath, the kind of trace a fast wash leaves behind when the hand washing has more to hide than to clean. The technician touched the swab gently and capped it. A single hair lay under the rubber, caught where the tip seats. Dyed dark, cut short, not white at the root. We would not need a microscope to see that Rory had paid for it at a salon. "Who rinsed this?" I asked. Marta's face did not change. It was the face of a professional who knows the difference between evidence and blame. "I rinsed it," she said. "After. I did not know it mattered then." "Who set it in the sink?" I said. "Jonah," she said, careful with each syllable. "He said he would help. He set it down and I ran water. I did not see anything on it. I was thinking about calling Dax and telling him to come back in." Dax began to speak and then thought better of it. "Show me how you would bang ice with this when you are short on crushed," I said to Jonah. He did not argue. He took the muddler by the shaft in his left hand and made 3 short taps on the steel lip of the well, an efficient staccato that would break cubes into smaller pieces without flamboyance. The rubber tip kissed metal and came back with a wet dot. The angle of his wrist set the face of the tip in the same plane as the rail dent in front of Rory. I held the muddler above Rory's last position and let it hover. A left hand, a short arc, a target at close range. Rubber backed by steel distributes force into a shape that bones remember even after the skin forgets. The fracture line we had seen on Rory would draw a rectangle with rounded corners if you laid a transparency of it over this tool. I looked at his sleeves. The left cuff showed a fine darkness near the edge. You could call it street dirt if the street were made of unburned carbon. I had the technician bring a fresh tape lift. The tape came back with a soft black that flashed under the lamp and went quiet under white light. Butane soot does not shine. It absorbs. On the right cuff, the tape lifted nothing beyond lint and the day's business. "Where would soot like this come from in a bar?" I asked the room. "Candles," Dax said too quickly. "The jukebox. The kitchen vent when it blows back. Candles leave wax and yellow smoke," I said. "The jukebox leaves dust and spilled cola. The kitchen vent leaves a film you can feel. This is fine and soft and lives on the edge of a cuff that brushes a lighter body when a left thumb rolls the wheel. It lives on the heel of a palm that steadies near a wheel. It lives in a bar when someone lights with their left without thinking." The technician brought the ashtray from Jonah's stool. The half-smoked cigarette had waited patiently for its turn to testify. The lip indent sank deeper on the left side. The ash pile leaned left of center where gravity asks it to if a left hand rests and the ember falls with its own weight. I bagged it and set the tray aside. We opened the office door farther and checked the frame where Jonah's shoulder had struck on his quick turn out of the camera's return. A faint clip of soot and damp lived at the height of his left sleeve. The lift took a light gray with a darker heart. Not cleaner water. Not city dirt. I marked the spot and let the bar own it. I wanted one more shape. I asked the technician to bring out the foam head from the kit. It is a simple thing, a training mannequin the lab uses to illustrate mechanics for juries who deserve to see what words cannot draw quickly enough. We set it on a stool where Rory's head had been and marked the fracture line from the preliminary notes. I asked Jonah to stand where he had stood at 107 and to lift the muddler as if he meant only to threaten with it. He did not like the game. He did it anyway. The left hand rose. The arc shortened when he realized his reach was not theatrical. The rubber tip stopped inches over the line that would matter. "Drop it," I said softly. He did not. I looked at Marta. "Give me your poor towel," I said. She handed me a clean one. I folded it twice and held it where Rory's shoulder would have been if he had leaned to his right to protect himself. The dent in the rail caught the edge of the fold. The shape of the foam head and the muddler made a triangle any juror could sketch. Short arc, close distance. Soft face over hardcore. Dull report. Fall. The last trace I wanted from the back counter lived under the lip of the rail. A fresh dent where a ring might have glanced off when a fist that was trying to be a shield ricocheted. I measured the dent and then measured Jonah's belt buckle where the silvery rectangle caught the stage camera's glint before the blackout. Later, photographs would pair the paint transfer on the underside of the rail with the microscuffs on the buckle's edge. Tonight, I only needed to see the story's shape. A left hand brings down a muddler. A right hand comes up too late and kisses wood. A body goes down. Another body moves in a tight triangle. Panel, well, hall. I asked for the business devices, not just phones. Anything with a camera and a clock. Dax surrendered a tablet that lived by the register. The lock screen carried a smear I did not need to test. The router log had already told me what I needed to know about whose device had walked near the office at 1:03. But I still wanted a rhythm to the evening that would make sense of the missing minute. Bank applications leave footprints as tidy as matchbooks. The forensics lead would pull those in the morning. I left a note with times and requests in block letters. No adjectives. Eli spoke into the quiet, voice careful. I heard the scratch before the hit, he said, as if testing whether he had permission to announce what the room had already confessed. I thought someone dragged a stool, but when you played it, I knew it was the wheel. He was lighting. He was going to say something, and then the something did not get said. Poppy watched Jonah instead of me. There was no cruelty in her look. Only the tired knowledge of someone who has seen temper arrive in rooms that were not ready for it. He said he does not smoke, she said, not as a question. Everyone lies about something in a bar, I said. Tonight the lies have a pattern. The left hand lies the least. I put the muddler in a bag that would make a lab technician sigh because stainless fights clean lifts. I added the swab from the rubber lip and the hair. I sealed them with the date and time and my initials. I logged the switch print card and the tape lifts from the cuff and the door frame. I tagged the ashtray and the cigarette. I wrote the numbers for the foam head demonstration on the back of my notebook in the shorthand I have carried since the academy. Then I straightened and let the room breathe. We had moved from angles to contact, from suggestion to touch. The back counter and the burn had put a left hand on two acts, cutting the witness and making the strike. It had put that same hand on the tool and on the edge of the lighter. It had put that hand in the hall in the moment after. Now we make the weapon speak plain, I said, and we let the minute before the strike find its first spark. I turned the bar lights up to working brightness and asked them all to sit where they had sat before the night turned. The next part would not require darkness. It would require sequence. Part 8, the weapon in plain sight. There is a point in any room like this when the obvious object has to stop pretending it is a prop. I set the bagged muddler on the bar and let everyone look at it the way a small congregation looks at a relic they would rather not venerate. Stainless, rubber tip, a tool made for drinks and patience. I had the technician photograph it in situ one more time, then on plain background, a north, east, south, and west that would give the lab its bearings. We logged the earlier swab from under the rubber lip, and I asked for a second pass along the seam where the tip pressed onto the shaft. The stick lifted a rust-brown tint so faint you could mistake it for old citrus until the field test put color to it. The phenolphthalein blushed where the swab touched. It was a quiet answer, the sort of truth that does not raise its voice because it has history on its side. Marta watched with that working calm that has nothing to do with indifference. She kept her eyes on my hands, not on Jonah's. If I had seen that, I would have called it, she said, voice low and steady. I know, I said. You rinsed what someone else set down. The water line under the dry trace says so. We turned to the hair we had lifted from under the rubber tip. Under the portable scope, the cut showed the clean angle of a salon trim, not a fray. Dye sat in the cortex like a dark river. I did not need the lab to tell me that Rory had bought that color. We would bank the hair for a full comparison later. For now, the story did not ask me to gamble. The room had already placed Rory and the muddler close enough for the transfer to be ordinary after an extraordinary second. I set the muddler beside the foam head on the stool again and paired the rounded edges. I asked the technician to read out the rough radius we had from the preliminary on Rory's fracture. 3 centimeters at the corner, a rounded rectangle that would rather be a circle but had accepted its limitations. The rubber face on the muddler tip mapped onto that number like it had been waiting to be recognized. Bottles make different bones talk, I said to the room. They break in a way that adds their own signature. You get cuts, you get percussion marks that look like teeth. This is not a bottle. This is soft backed by hard. A focused, dull force that spreads just enough to let skull give before skin tears. It is why there is no bottle glass in Rory's hair, and why the shards near him belong to his drink and not to the weapon. Eli leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes on the tip as if it were a metronome he was trying to count against. It would not take much, he said, tone flat. A short pop from there. He would go down. It would not take much, I said. That is the trouble with short tempers and tools that feel harmless. I walked Jonah through the minute again, not with accusation but with logistics. You said you helped clean, I said. Show me how you held the muddler when you set it in the sink. He took it in his left and reached through the lifted rail. His palm turned inward at the last beat, the way hands do when they mean to lay something down without clatter. The rubber lip kissed the steel. A ring of water that lived in the basin climbed and marked the shaft a finger's width from the tip. The distance from that water line to the base matched the dry trace mark under the lip we had already lifted, which meant the rinse had been quick and shallow. A man does not take time to soap a tool he is not ready to admit he used. Why bang ice? I asked, because I wanted to hear the fiction he had prepared. Jonah looked at the well like it might answer for him. Marta was short, he said. I was helping. Show me how you help when you are not nervous, Marta said without heat. You pass me glasses. You carry bins. You do not touch my tools. He glanced at her, not angry, not pleading, simply measuring what she had said against the room's patience. It was habit from somewhere else, he said finally. I worked a summer bar long before this. The motion comes back before the sense does. It was the first honest sentence he had given me without hedging. It did not rescue him. It gave me the kind of human line a jury understands. People pick up the tools they have used before. They pick them up with the hand they trust. I turned to the sink and ran water over the muddler's rubber tip, this time in front of everyone, flooding the seam and turning the tool slowly as I went. The trickle that came off carried a faint blush we had already captured. When it cleared, I dried the face on a white towel. No fresh stain appeared. A post-incident rinse had already done most of the theater. All that remained tonight was the residue of haste and a mistake under a lip that water had missed. I asked the technician for a control. He brought a second muddler from the kit, clean as a clock in a display case. I set that one against the foam head with the same angle and struck with my open right hand. In air, a ghost of the hit without contact. The line the rubber would have drawn matched the fracture map we had marked. Then I set both muddlers down, the clean in plain view, the seized one back in its bag. Could someone else have set it in the sink? Dax asked. He looked like a man rehearsing an investor's Q&A where the numbers cannot be bullied into kindness. Eli, Poppy, Marta. Anyone. They could, I said. But Marta has a habit, and so do the rest of you. Watch where hands live when the brain is busy. Marta uses her right to reach the well. Poppy would have had to cross herself awkwardly. Eli stayed at the stage and carries with the right. You, Dax, talk with your right and meddle with your right. Jonah is the only one in this room who picked that tool with his left and set it down the way a man sets down something he has just used for a purpose he wants to forget. I kept my voice even. I did not add the soot on the cuff, the left index on the AUX rocker, the lighter's burrs, the coaster scorch. We had said those things already. Repetition would make it feel like insistence rather than weight. The weight was there on the bar. Marta's towel hung still on her shoulder. If that was the weapon, why is there no blood on the outside that we can see now? She said, not combative, just precise. Because the strike was short and close, I said. Because the rubber face spreads the force and takes only what it must. Because your rinse did its appointed work. Because the groove under the lip caught what the water could not reach. A lab is not magic, but it is patient. It will find more dye in that hair than in any other place in this room. Poppy rested her hands on her knees. And because a man who has just done something he did not intend to do pretends to be useful in the next breath, she said softly. He reaches for a tool and gives it a reason to be wet. Jonah said nothing. I took his left forearm and turned the cuff. The soot we had lifted had left a faint smudge even after the tape. The fabric told me the same story it had earlier. I let go. Sequence is what convinces people who want to believe in coincidence, I said. It is not enough to have a tool and a bruise that match. It is not enough to have a left hand near a left switch. We must show what the minute looked like before the minute that went dark, how a small spark became a strike. The stage microphone gave us the scrape of a wheel. The coaster gave us the scorch where the flame leaned. The ashtray gave us the lip indent leaning left. We will tie those together next. When we do, the muddler will stop needing our help to explain itself. Eli raised a hand as if we were in a classroom and he had been trained to wait his turn. The word on the audio, he said. Can we hear it again? In a moment, I said. I want the first half of the breath that came before it. I had the technician set a handheld recorder on the rail and let it pick up the normal room while I talked. Then I took the clean lighter from the kit, rolled with my left, and held it near the napkin at the coaster's edge the way a distracted smoker would. The flame leaned outward. The brown kiss appeared where I expected it. I killed the flame and set the lighter left of center without looking, the way a hand that owns it does. I did each of those motions in a single unbroken rhythm. Then I asked the technician to play the stage mic sample again. Scrape. Syllable starting. Strike. What came between the scrape and the strike? I said. A breath drawn to say a word. The kind of word that belongs at the end of an argument that has used up its vocabulary. The kind that makes a hand choose a tool for emphasis. When that hand already has the lighter in it, it puts the lighter down, reaches without thinking for the nearest stick, and the distance is so short a person feels the choice was smaller than it was. I looked at Jonah and I looked at the bar. You could call it an accident, I said. You could, if the breaker had not been cut for a minute and a left hand had not steadied there. If a cuff were not black with soot. If a muddler had not been rinsed and set down as if it were born in a sink. But accidents do not arrange scenes. People do. No one answered me. The bar answered the way bars do by holding still. I turned to the technician. Pull every second of the minute before the blackout for the stage mic, I said. We will mark the scrape. We will mark the syllable. We will watch Jonah in the last frames before the lens goes blind. Then we will walk the route from spark to strike without skipping a foot of floor. I set the bagged muddler on the counter where everyone could see it and would stop pretending the room would forget it. The weapon had stepped out of the chorus and taken its solo. The next thing to do was to let the lighter hum its note exactly where it belonged in the score. Part 9, the spark before the strike. I asked the technician to roll the stage microphone back 5 minutes from the blackout and let it run at half speed through a set of headphones while the small desk speaker played a faithful copy. Rooms have a tempo and, if you listen long enough, a melody. This one had 3 instruments at the end. The wheel, the word, the blow. At 105 and change, the bar hummed with the soft percussion of chores. At 106, a chair leg side. At 106 and 50, a match flared outside the front door where the awning breaks the rain. A sound like tissue burning. Poppy's storm match. Then a door hinge whispered shut. At 107 and 30, the frequency floor lifted a hair the way it does when 2 people decide they are done pretending to be calm. Mark there, I said. The technician tapped a key and dropped a tiny flag. The waveform looked like breath with a stone in it. Now the wheel, I said. At 107 and 41, the scrape arrived. The wheel on a cheap butane lighter sounds like sand under a skate. You can count the burrs if you have done it enough. The first 2 clicks stuttered a little, the way a right hand will hesitate with a tool that belongs to the left. The 3rd click settled in. The left thumb had corrected the choreography and rolled the wheel in a clean counterclockwise climb. The flame that followed had that small gasp all new fire makes. You hear it when you slow the world down. I asked for a spectrogram overlay. The technician obliged, the bands rising in pale ladders. I took the seized lighter out of its bag and lit it once with my left hand near the desk mic. The pattern on the screen found its sister. The ridges kissed in the same places. The frequency of the wheel teeth and the tempo of a left thumb were close enough to live in the same home. I did not call it a match. I called it a conversation between two small machines and the same habit. I set the lighter down left of center on the coaster again without looking. The small brown crescent on the edge of the napkin was already dry from my earlier demonstration. I angled the flame outward with my left so everyone could see what outward meant. It leaned away from the case, not toward it, and it kissed the paper without trying. When I switched hands and rolled with my right, the flame leaned in and spared the paper unless I forced it. I did it twice and let the room watch the difference. Then I asked the technician to play the wheel again. Scrape, gasp, and then a human breath gathering a word. "What word?" Eli said. "Not the word," I said. "Only its first bone. A consonant made by the tongue near the teeth. A start that belongs to stop or wait or no." The syllable came and died. A beat later the blow landed. The microphone picked up the rubber's dull report, a sound that is all consequence and no decoration. The impact did not ring. It thudded and took the air with it. Then the scrape of shoe and the shift of a body leaving the frame the camera would not show. I had the technician freeze the last visible frame before the blackout. Jonah's left elbow crowded Rory's space. His right hand hovered near his jacket. In that same frame, the lighter sat left of the coaster. In the first frame after the blackout lifted, the lighter had moved a finger's width, skewed as if a hand had set it down in a hurry before reaching for something that felt more persuasive. The ashtray held the half cigarette with the left side lip indent. The ash fell to the left of the tray line. These were small shifts a jury would not notice until someone showed them twice. I planned to show them twice. I took Jonah's stool and sat in it. I let my left elbow find the rail where the lighter liked to live. I put a clean cigarette in the ashtray, unlit, and picked up the seized lighter. The first motion I forced myself to make with my right hand felt clumsy. The wheel skittered and the flame stumbled. I corrected with my left without thinking. I rolled clean. The flame leaned outward, kissed the napkin, and gave it a brown crescent brother to the first. I set the lighter down left of center and drew a breath to speak. Then I put the lighter down, reached with the same hand to the well where the muddler sat, and brought the tool up in the kind of compact motion a left hand favors when space is tight and pride is tired of losing ground. I did not complete the strike. I let the air remember what it would have felt like if I had. "Sequence makes sense because it is practical," I said. "He lights. He inhales and begins a word. He sets the lighter down where it lives and takes the nearest tool up with the hand that still owns the moment. It is quicker than thought, and that is why it happens." Jonah watched my hand and then looked at his own. He had made fists without meaning to. He unmade them and placed both hands flat on the bar. "The wheels scrape," Poppy said. Her voice was careful, the way surgeons handle explanations. "It jumps the first time." "It does," I said. A right hand tried and then the left took over. If he had truly been a right-hand smoker, the first flick would have worked and the flame would have leaned in. The scorch would have another shape. It does not. The microphone heard a hand correcting itself and a habit stepping forward. I asked the technician to isolate the first 3 clicks and play them alone. They sounded like 3 small doors trying on the same room. First uncertain, then certain again. "Could that scrape be a stool?" Dax tried. "It could," I said, "but it is not. A stool on tile sings a long note. A wheel bite is a quick chorus of short ones. The spectrogram bands for a stool are smooth. The bands for a wheel are serrated. We can argue instruments, but your ear already knows which one you just heard." Eli nodded and looked at the floor. I asked Marta to walk me through where she was at the second of the scrape. She set her position under the bar with the glass washer, right shoulder forward, left hand braced on the counter. Her angle put her eyes below the rail. She would have seen a left elbow crowd and a hand move fast but not the tool. She nodded at her own drawing of it, the way bar workers do when they realize their chores had framed a crime. "Do you smell the burn?" I asked her. She inhaled and waited. "Napkin," she said. "Not candle. Not cigarette paper. Napkin." She was right. It was the soft toast of paper kissed by a flame that leaned outward for a breath. That breath had a timing. It had happened inside the same second as the wheel. It had not belonged to a right hand. The coaster told me so. I had the technician print a still of the coaster and its scorch from the pre-seizure photograph and another still of the ashtray. Then a small frame of Jonah's hand as it came off the rail in the last visible second. The fingers were slightly open, the thumb flexed, the posture of a hand that has just set something down and is about to pick something else up. I pinned the stills in a row on a clipboard. Flame angle, ashtray, hand posture, a sequence in 4 small squares, each one almost nothing by itself, together a road. Now the money, I said, more to the case than to the people, because most short strikes are born with a ledger in their pocket. I took Dax's tablet and pulled the router log again to remind myself. 103, Jonah's phone in the office. 103 and a few seconds back on the bar side. I held the tablet where Jonah could see it and said nothing. He looked and looked away. People hate the part where machines confirm what they hoped memory would blur. The patrol officer knocked on the office door frame with her knuckle and held out a printout we had queued from a mobile extraction tool. Bank application activity. Jonah's account had moved $7,800 at 103 and some heartbeats from a business wallet to a personal one. An outgoing transaction sat queued on a screen capture, not sent yet, to a contact labeled Rory. The amount field was empty. The cursor blinked like a small and interested eye. Rory texted you at 12:54. I said, bring cash now or we are done. Jonah said nothing. You took money from the business at 103, I said. You stepped back to the bar. You argued with the man to your right. You lit a cigarette. You said you do not smoke. You rolled the wheel with your left thumb. The flame leaned outward and kissed the napkin. You began a word. You set the lighter down left of center and brought your left hand up with the nearest convincer. The recorder blinked because someone had flicked an AUX switch with a left index. The blow landed. The muddler went into the sink. Your left shoulder hit the hall on the way out. I kept my voice calm. If you let a sequence speak in one tone, the room will bring its own emphasis. Poppy's eyes stayed on Jonah's hands, not his face. Her mouth tightened once and relaxed. Eli looked sick in a way that was more about knowing than about blood. Marta stared at the rim of a glass she would have to throw away in the morning and then looked past it to the dent in the rail. Dax made a small move as if to smooth his shirt and then stopped himself because smoothing would look like guilt. Jonah's jaw worked twice and then set. He reached up and touched the edge of his left cuff with his right fingers, a gesture as small as any in the night and larger than most. He said nothing. The silence was not a strategy. It was a man leaving a room inside his head to take inventory. I put the clipboard with the stills on the bar beside the bagged muddler and the bagged lighter. The story had become a row of things that could sit still and be pointed at. Scrape, outward flame, syllable cut, blow. A left hand that owned all of them. Next, I said quietly, we fix motive and the blackout together and let the numbers and the switch agree. Then we will ask the room to hear the demonstration once, all the way through, so there is no place left for the answer to sit but where it already is. Part 10, debt, leverage, and the blackout. Money is the oldest motive that still looks new in the dark. I set the printout side by side on the bar. The text from Rory at 12:54, the bank application activity at 103, the router log that placed Jonah's phone near the office at the same moment, and the network returned to the bar a minute later. Paper makes a tidy choir when it sings in one key. Tell me about the business, I said to Jonah. Start with what was supposed to be clean. He kept his hands flat. His voice, when it came, had sand in it. He spoke without decoration. The bar had a music night that made a little cash on top of the register totals. Side bets on sports, quiet tabs, favors extended and called in. He said he and Rory moved that current through a separate pool, liquid and fast. It worked until it did not. How deep? I asked. Enough, he said. Numbers, I said. He blinked, and then he gave them like a man reciting inventory he can no longer hide from himself. 2 payments late to a man who does not send reminders. A float patched twice with business funds on the promise of a good weekend. 7,800 taken at 1:03 because the account would still clear at that hour before the outgoing transfer settled. He did not say the word theft. He did not need to. Rory wanted it back in cash. I said. Yes, he said. He said no more screens. He wanted to hold the bills and count them as if that would fix what I had done. And you did not have it, I said. He did not answer. I turned to Dax. Did you know? I asked. He squared himself as if he were about to lift something heavy. I knew the bar was thin, he said. I did not know why. When I saw the drawer hold steady and the weekend still look fine, I thought the weather or a band that had lost its draw. I did not look under the next rock. That is my fault. Who has access to the business account? I asked. Me and Jonah, he said. Rory does not. He leaned on Jonah to lean on me. That was his style. I slid the bank activity back toward Jonah. You plan to peel from the business and settle a piece of the debt, I said. You went to the office to move it while the night still had enough time that the ledger would look dull in the morning. You came back to the bar. Rory did not accept the plan. He wanted more. He wanted now. He wanted to say the kind of word men say when they think more pressure makes money appear. Jonah watched the printout like it might draw breath. I pointed at the DVR timeline, the neat band of gray where the picture had died. So the room gets smaller, I said. Voices tighten. You are left of Rory because that is where the numbers live. The lighter sits near your elbow because your left hand likes it there. The wheel scrapes. The flame leans outward and kisses a napkin edge. The syllable starts. The breaker panel has a leftmost switch that can give you 60 seconds of blindness if you touch it without looking like you meant to. A left hand plants and a left index flicks. The picture goes dark. You return to the rail in time to finish the sentence you did not let him say. The nearest convincer is a muddler. It does not look like a weapon until it is. Then you put it in the sink to pretend it was still only a tool. Stop, Marta said, not to save him, but to test the edges. If he planned the blackout, why not longer? Why not make sure the room had no picture for 5 minutes? Why risk 60 seconds that might not be enough? Because longer looks like a plan, I said. 60 looks like a glitch, especially in rain, especially on a system that hums when the compressors cycle. Because if you stand there counting while the screen is black, everyone who looks later will see a man waiting for a machine. But if you take one breath and do one thing and the picture returns to surprise, the minute becomes an accident no one will question unless the rest of the room refuses to be fooled. Dax looked at the panel as if it had grown teeth. Could the switch be bumped? He asked, weaker than before. I opened the small envelope with the gel card. The print we had lifted from the leftmost rocker was clear even in the field. A left index loop sat on the plastic in a posture that suggested a deliberate touch. I placed it on the bar between us. Bumped leaves a smear without ridges, I said. This shows a pad landing, pressure at the tip and lift. Right shape, right angle, right finger. Jonah looked at the card for a long beat. Then he put his eyes on me. You think I turned off the camera and hit him on purpose, he said. You think I thought that far in a minute. I think you used a habit as a plan, I said. I think you have touched that switch before to quiet a recorder when it stuttered. I think your left hand knows the height and the feel. I think when money and pride lit the short fuse between you and a man who once did you favors, you reached for what was familiar. You let the room go blind and you made a bad choice faster than you knew you were going to make it. He let out a breath that might have wanted to be a laugh. It was not. He called me a word, he said. You will hear that in the syllable. He liked words when he felt tall. He wanted me small in front of the room. And you were tired of small, I said. He did not nod. He did not have to. I looked at Poppy. What did you hear before the strike? I asked. A scrape, she said. A breath. A start. My hand drew back because I thought they were done. Then the not done happened. Would you have seen Jonah go to the breaker? I asked. No, she said. I was front of the board. The panel lives at the back counter. I have stood in this room long enough to know the distances. He could have reached and returned in 2 steps I would not notice while chalk dust held my eyes. Eli kept his voice low, as if the room would punish volume. He did not swing from his shoulder. It sounded close. It sounded like he wanted to make a point, not a hole. Men do not decide the outcomes of their points, I said. Physics does for them. I turned back to the bank paper. The transfer at 103, I said. Why that number? It was what I could move without a flag, Jonah said. It would buy me a day. It was never going to buy me more. Why not send it? I asked. Why not finish the move to Rory in the app? Because he wanted cash, Jonah said. Because he wanted to count it. Because he wanted the moment more than he wanted the money. And you wanted to keep your share of the bar alive more than you wanted to give him that moment, I said. He closed his eyes. It made no difference to the room. I took another sheet from the stack the patrol officer had brought. The house internet had cached a page from Jonah's bank that showed the last login, and the device identifier matched his phone. The printout was time-stamped 1:03 and 9 seconds. The office camera, the only one that had not been installed or connected, looked at an empty chair. Dax had meant to finish that job for months. Tonight, I was grateful for his procrastination. It allowed the story to stay small. I placed the phone bagged on the bar and used gloved fingers to press the side button. The lock screen lit. The first 2 notifications were texts from Rory earlier in the night. The third was a failed attempt at a second transfer, then canceled. The timestamp was 1:06 and 40, the minute before the blackout. The gesture of a man who had tried in the last stretch to make numbers behave with a screen while a voice at his left shoulder asked for bills. I slid the phone back to the technician. I felt the room settle by increments. There is a kind of relief that has nothing to do with mercy. It arrives when a scene stops arguing with itself. I looked at Jonah's left hand. The cuff had a dusting of soot where the tape lift had not taken it all. The skin above the wrist showed the outline of a watch he did not wear. He had wanted to be another kind of man for the last year. Men try on hands when they try on lives. The old hand always wins. Tell me about the right and the left on the switch, I said. When you wrote your statement a few minutes ago, you said you hit the right switch by mistake. The panel shows the recorder lives on the leftmost. Why did you say right? He stared at me and then at the panel and then at the gel card. Because right sounded like accident, he said. Because left sounded like me. It was the truest thing he had said all night. I let the silence be a ledger. Then I spoke to the room rather than to him. We have sequence, I said. We have motive. We have a blackout you can map with a hand and a switch. We have a tool that matches a wound and a rinse that missed the seam. We have a lighter that puts a left thumb at work at the right second. We have a cuff that learned soot when pride needed fire. We will show this once more in one motion so the order lives in your bodies and not just on paper. Marta touched the edge of the bar as if to steady it. Poppy set her chalk down. Eli closed his case and let it rest. Dax stared at the panel like it had been waiting to ruin his insurance premium for years. Jonah kept his hands on the wood. After the demonstration, I said, I will call the wagon. Until then, no one moves. We will let this place breathe one more truth, and then we will be done arguing about whose it is. The rain had thinned to a whisper against the glass. The neon letter dimmed and brightened the way a bad conscience does. The bar was almost ready to hear itself. Final part, the counterclockwise proof. I cleared a strip of bar top and made a stage of it. No theatrics, just enough order that a jury would not have to lean forward to believe. Everyone back to your marks, I said. Marta stood behind the rail near the glass washer. Dax at the far register. Eli by the stage corner with his case closed. Poppy at the oak, chalk down. Jonah at Rory's left, the space he had owned all night. I placed 4 objects in a row where the light could find them. The bagged lighter, the bagged muddler, the gel card with the left index from the AUX rocker, the clipboard of stills showing the coaster scorch, the ashtray, and the hand posture in the last visible frame. The stage mic speaker sat at the end like a small nervous witness. We do this once, I said. Natural hands, natural speed. I had each person light the seized lighter his or her own way. Marta hesitated, then laughed without humor and said she would rather tear a match. I gave her a pass and watched her right hand try the wheel anyway. The flame leaned inward. She set the lighter right of center by reflex. Dax performed his wooden match ritual despite himself, then rolled the wheel with his right thumb when I insisted. Inward flame, right side placement. Eli rolled with his right and produced a wobbly fire that told the truth about how seldom he used one. Inward again, right side again. Poppy took the lighter and, after a breath, rolled with her right. The flame leaned inward. She set it down to the right of the coaster and looked at the scorch without letting her face move. "Jonah," I said. He picked up the lighter with his left. His hand corrected the weight before he noticed it had done so. He rolled the wheel with his left thumb. The flame leaped and leaned outward, away from the case. A small bright blade pointed toward the napkin edge. I put my hand flat on the bar top without stopping him and let the room hear the wheel on the stage speaker at the same time. Scrape with the same serrated bands. A quick inhale from the flame. The syllable started in the recording. He set the lighter down left of center. The brown kiss on the fresh napkin appeared in the same place as the first. I did not look at him. I looked at the picture the room had made. "Now the strike," I said. We set the foam head on the stool in Rory's place, marked with the fracture arc from the preliminary. I asked Jonah to stand where he had stood and to hold the bagged muddler with his left hand as if it were clean. He did. I had him raise it to the height his wrist wanted. I had him stop. I took the bag tool back before contact and held it against the mapped line. 3 centimeters at the corner. A soft face backed by steel. The geometry matched. The stage mic played the dull report from the night. The rubber on bone with steel behind it. The sound no room mistakes for anything else once it has heard it once. I stepped to the breaker panel and pointed to the diagonal smear across the top of the door. The field photograph had caught the heel of a left hand and the reach of fingers to a leftmost switch. I showed the gel card with the left index loop in the posture of a deliberate flick. The height matched Jonah, not Dax. The angle matched a left hand coming in from the near side, not a right crossing over itself. I did not say probable or likely. I said the numbers we had measured and the distances we had counted. The bar did the rest. The technician put the bank activity printout and the router log under a clip on the bar. 103, a transfer from business to personal. 103 and a breath, the device near the office access point. 106 and change, a canceled second transfer. 107 and 41, the wheel. 107 and 42, the syllable. 107 and 43, the blow. 108 and 41, picture returns to a room that has stopped breathing. I let the sequence sit without my voice on it. A demonstration does not need a narrator when the parts refuse to contradict each other. "Questions?" I said finally. Dax stared at the panel and shook his head once. A small, clean motion. Eli pressed his lips together and did not trust them. Poppy kept her eyes on the scorch marks and the ashtray and the open left hand that had set the lighter down without looking. Marta looked at Jonah and then at me and then at the muddler bag, and the line of her mouth settled. Jonah rubbed his left wrist with his right thumb. He looked not at the bar but at the piece of air above it where his nights used to live. He did not ask for a lawyer. He did not ask for a timeout. He said a single sentence to the room without raising his voice. "I did not mean to kill him," he said. "Intent is an argument for a court," I said. "Sequence is an argument for the night." I radioed for the wagon and the team that handles scenes that have agreed to stop arguing. We logged the last items, boxed the foam head, sealed the bagged muddler, and placed the lighter in a hard case with the gel card flicker of a left index taped to its lid. The patrol officer opened the front door for air and purpose. The rain had thinned to a mist fine enough to hide in. I walked Jonah to the back booth where the cuffs would be polite. He did not make a show of anything. When I read the rights, he listened like a man taking down a recipe he would never cook. When I stood, the room had that loose feeling bars get when the fight is over and the furniture remembers how to be furniture again. Marta asked what to do with the lime bin. I told her to throw it and start over in the morning. Dax asked about the DVR and whether an insurance adjuster would insist on a replacement. I told him to keep his receipts. Eli lifted his case, nodded once to no one, and left quietly through the mist. Poppy erased the mark she had made on the board and wiped the chalk from her left thumb with her right. I picked up the lighter one last time with a glove and looked at the crescent of dull chrome on its left face. It had not cared about anyone's story, only about how a thumb approached a wheel. In the end, that was enough. They took Jonah out the side door to the car. I signed the chain of custody and watched the pen write my name as if it had written it before. I set my glass of water on a fresh coaster and left the old one with the scorch in an evidence sleeve. On my way past the breaker, I closed the panel with my right hand. Felt wrong. Some rooms belonged to left hands. This one had until it did not. Outside, the city washed itself and started counting. The story has ended. The rain had already washed the street twice before the body left the room. By then, the bar had gone back to pretending it was only a place for noise, for hands, for tired people who like to forget. But somewhere under a stack of fresh coasters, a single brown scorch waited, a crescent of heat that once leaned outward from a left thumb's habit. It was a small thing, almost invisible, the kind of thing that keeps detectives like Nadia Hart awake, counting the seconds between a spark and a blow. When the lighter's flame died, the story didn't. It just folded itself back into the city to wait for the next argument, the next missing minute, the next room that thinks it's safe from its own reflection. Thank you for staying until the very last frame of Somnolent Conspiracies. If you could still hear the rain at the end, you were listening closely enough. Subscribe, tap the bell, and stay with us. Because every silence in this city hides a sequence waiting to be heard. Somnolent Conspiracies, where even the quiet has evidence.